Over the next few weeks, we're going to be working on something that's been around for thousands of years. I also find it very therapeutic. I'm a therapist, that's why I like to apply this stuff. It's a concept that some people have heard of, some people dive deep into, but most people don't know what it is. And I want to share with you why I find it very therapeutic, but also why it facilitates your understanding if you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever, or just a philosopher. If you're interested in good mental health, there's some really good teachings, really precise rules that come from Hermeticism, okay? It's not some sort of foreign, I've heard it described as a cult type of thing. I'll walk you right through some of the most powerful aspects of what Hermeticism is, and it's not something to be afraid of, and I find it completely consistent, as we're going to talk about over here a little bit, with all the world's major religions. It just adds layers and adds depth to it. And in many cases, you're going to see direct influence from some of these teachings into some of the various more mainstream religions. It's been around for a long time, and some people really like it. They spend a lot of time diving into it. There's tons of writings about it. But given the stuff that we've been working on here, you're going to understand it quickly. We're going to talk about something today called the Emerald Tablet. We're going to talk about wisdom from the Emerald Tablet. And you've been doing enough work that I know you're going to immediately go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's true. I mean, it's been around thousands of years, and you're going to understand it today. That's cool, without even really diving into it. I know plenty of people out there have dove into it. They're feel free to add comments and clarify things if they want. But certainly we can go really, really deep with it. But I'm going to focus on three things over the next 3 weeks. We could call it thrice great, which, by the way, is an inside joke for those people who understand the meaning of his name. We'll do that in a second. But anyhow, Hermeticism has been around for thousands of years. There's a main character who's been given credit as being the author of most of these teachings by the name of Hermes Trismegistus, okay? Trismegistus means thrice great, okay? And so the name is an interesting one because there's many people who recognize this is not just one guy. It's sort of like the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu was given credit for it, but most people think it was a collection of people. And they put it under the heading Lao Tzu, which in Chinese means the old man. So, it's sort of a giveaway. To me, thrice great is like that. There's multiple people who probably contributed to these teachings. And several of these teachings, much like Jesus didn't write anything down. He didn't have an Instagram or a blog or anything like that, right? He just spoke and then people wrote the stuff down later. Whatever Hermes was or whomever he was, the teachings that he did weren't really being written down. It was a lot of an oral tradition. And several things were written down later, including concepts that got written down in the early 1900s, well after the fact. So there's an oral tradition, there's some writings. It's broad, cross-section of things. There's a lot of cross-influence and cross-referencing. It's also not something that I'm really interested in about the history of it. I share it with people who are interested so you can get some context. I'm interested in the meaning of all this stuff, okay? What are the messages? So, a little more context. Hermes is well known to be a combination of two characters in particular. Hermes from the Greek and Thoth, or Thought, depending on how it's said, which is an Egyptian god, both of them. He was from both cultures considered to be a wise prophet, okay? Over time, he sort of got merged into this character. That's at least how I understand it. And there's many people who believe there's other characters involved in this, including names like Enoch and Solomon and Melchizedek, and Plato's involved, Stoicism. I mean, there's cross-referencing again. Some of Platoism is in some Hermetics and vice versa. I mean, it's all over the place, okay? So it's a nice cross-section of a lot of things that are getting along together, okay? Now, I'm going to emphasize, because I came across some influence into Islam too, but I personally see direct influence and connection to some Taoist teachings, some Christianity, and some Buddhism. And as I read some of the teachings to you, I'll point that out. Where you can see it's consistent. I'm all about unity, seeing the perennial philosophy in things. As Hermes himself, or in the Emerald Tablet, it talks about how everything comes from one source. So it all has to be centered around one common entity. And sure enough, I think it's obvious that it is, okay? So, of the three things we're going to go through, the first will be the Emerald Tablet. Now, its origin is around 200, I think, a couple hundred years after Jesus walked the earth. And it's when probably a group of people put together a collection of writings, and it's really deep. And much like the Bible, there's a lot to it, and you could read through all of it. What I've done is distilled it down to some of my favorite teachings, okay? There's a lot of good teachings. The Emerald Tablet is a superb source for wisdom. Next week, we're going to do the 7 Hermetic principles. A lot of that comes from, again, Hermes' teachings, but it was written down and really broadened and deepened by a book called the Kabbalion in the early 1900s. Superb book, real deep, real precise, and I love it, and we're going to be talking about that too. And we're going to end with alchemy, which for a long time has been a therapeutic tool I've always had in my head. That I'm working with people that don't even know I'm thinking about alchemy while I'm working with people. I got to go to the VA yesterday and work with people there. The last 2 months I've been in prison working with people, and I'm constantly thinking about alchemy, even if I never mention it. I have it in blue, and I have it linked to this because that's the lake samadhi that we've been talking about for months. I've left it up there. Like I said, I might leave it up there all year because it's going to be found in every teaching too. There's a centering all of us have. There's a balance point, if you will. There's an ability, as the Buddha said, inside each of our consciousness that rests a lake, that it's comfortable and it's clear and it gives you clarity and it's very peaceful. Go there more often. Like the Tao Te Ching says, anchor yourself in that lake, right? Nothing can get you there. Now, everything outside of that lake is chaos, right? Until you learn how to get in the lake. And once you get in that lake, you can stay there. That's mindfulness in so many ways. You'll see that's present in everything. And as we get into alchemy, the tools of alchemy can really help you get into that lake as well. Every philosophy will do it one way or another. But I'm going to link it straight to alchemy. And that, again, that'll be in a couple weeks when we go through all that. But first, we want to go through heavy emphasis on the importance of messages. I don't really care who said various truths. I want to know if it works. My joke is my neighbor's 5-year-old kid could say some sort of truth like, we should all be forgiving. I'm like, wow, that's deep, man. We should be forgiving. Well, Jesus said that too. Well, is Jesus more right than my 5-year-old neighbor? Aren't they both right? Where in the journey of going through all of this stuff is the prophet more important than the message? In the Course in Miracles, the woman who channeled that book, she says, she didn't even want her name on the book because she said she didn't write the book. She channeled Jesus, she said. And she said, you can tell people that I wrote it when I'm dead, right? Her name was Helen Schumann. And when she died, we finally got to know who it was. Muhammad, why can't you show his image anywhere? He didn't want credit for the Quran. He said, I didn't write it. I channeled it. Allah spoke it to me. And then he recited it. It's not like the Quran by Muhammad. Okay? He didn't want attention. Very, very humble. He didn't want his image everywhere. I often joke that sometimes if I ever get to the book where I want to write the screenplay of Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad talking together, right? The idea of Jesus and Buddha saying, you know what? I think that was a good idea, Muhammad, right? That not showing your image. Because you go into every church everywhere, there's a picture of Jesus on the cross, and Buddha's always shown as the fat Buddha. And they're both like, I don't really want to remember those images too well, right? And they just would have fun with it. It's spirited. It makes sense to not emphasize the flesh, right? Let's not emphasize that. Let's emphasize the message. So the messenger doesn't matter nearly as much. So moving forward, I'm not too interested in any of this stuff. It's useful, and if it's interesting, fine. But we're going to really hit the messages. And that's the beauty of this. What's so profound is what we're going to find in these Emerald tablets. Now, I've only got a cross-section of it down, but I'm going to go through this stuff. And then I'll reference it myself. You'll probably pick up on it a lot right away. But I just got 2 pages of it. Master are you of your destiny, free to take or reject at will. Take the power, take the wisdom, and shine as a light among the children of men. So I think of this very much as a free will thing. Everyone can do this. Everyone has the ability to develop wisdom. Everyone has the ability to be the light. Jesus specifically said, you are the light of the world. Buddha said, you are Buddha too, okay? These prophets put us on their level. They're very humble. Muhammad doesn't want his picture shown anywhere, okay? And so we have very specific instructions here that it's going to be offered to you. Wisdom is offered to you. What's your choice? Take it or leave it. It's like the Matrix. Take the red pill or the blue pill. Do you want to learn about it or not? It's in some ways your only point of free will. When I go through the science in New Eyes, those who have developed an inner, sort of stability and a strength and a light and conviction, all that, have different experiences than those who haven't. Those of us who want to move through things like addiction and mental health issues and develop a higher vibrational state, especially as they get into these types of teachings, they have different experiences as a result. What's not to like about it, I always say, but at the same time, like the Tao Te Ching says again as well, that the sage doesn't speak, he waits to be asked. Muhammad says to not force religion. He says no need to force religion on others because truth stands out clear from error. Jesus says don't worry about a speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your own. See, prophets don't really have a need to force this on people because you're eventually going to figure it out yourself, right? And so it's given to us freely like sunlight. It's always there, always being offered to us. You can do with it what you will. So same thing with this. You are a master of your destiny. Take it or reject it at your will. Your choice. Got to remember, my readers. Time changes not, but all things change in time. Time is the force that holds events separate, each in its own proper place. Time is not in motion, but you move through time as your consciousness moves from one event to another. So again, here we have reference to New Eyes and timelessness. What Einstein long time ago proved, that time doesn't exist. It's a dimension. Time isn't whatever you think of time. It's not that. Time is a spatial dimension. It's the fourth dimension. And here we have Hermes, or the teachings of Hermes, from thousands of years ago saying, hey, time isn't what you think it is. If it's anything, it's your consciousness traveling to different events. And Einstein called it a distance because you go from one moment or a place to the next place. And that takes time to do it, but it's really a distance. It's block, three-dimensional block experiences moving to the next one, like a flip book, but it's three-dimensional. And so time doesn't exist, but my favorite part of this is your consciousness is moving from one event to another. It gets the idea, or the mind, off of the idea of the body anyways, because your consciousness is what's creating the reality through your intersection with it. You'll see the first rule of the Hermetic principles, the first one is all is mental. Not all is physical, it's practically Einstein. Everything is energy, right? All is mental, and your consciousness is moving from an experience to experience. And that's what time is. Remember, all that exists is only another form of that which exists not. And you are not an exception. All that it exists is another form of that which doesn't exist. And you are not an exception. I read that and I'm like, that's superposition. It's also what we talked about in right view of the Buddhas. And I told you the story of Thich Nhat Hanh talking about in order to understand the Eightfold Path and to get to Samadhi, you have to understand concepts like this. You have a match that's not lit. That's called unmanifest. And then you light it. Now it's a flame. And then you blow it out. Now it's unmanifest again. Thich Nhat Hanh said you have to understand those things are the same thing but different. You have no flame, then you have a flame, so that's obviously different. But he says, but it's still the same. One's unmanifest, one's manifest. They're both a flame. And that's one of many examples, like I like to say. Your 10-year-old self is no longer you, right? You identify with your 10-year-old self? And would you call that you if you saw a picture of your 10-year-old self? You're like, oh, that's me as a little kid. But is it still you? No. Same but different. So now we have Hermes saying the exact same thing, just a different way. That which exists is only another form of that which does not exist. That's the flame existing and not existing. And in superposition, it's the idea of this moment that we're experiencing right now. Let's face it, each one of you could sat in the chair next to you. You could have done that. Superposition says that does exist. There's another dimension, if you will, or another existence in which you are sitting in the chair next to you. And before you came in here, that pathway had to exist to give you that opportunity to sit in that chair. Guess what? That still exists right now. That is superposition. And that's what Hermes is saying. That which exists is another form of something which does not exist. It also works quite nicely spiritually. The manifestation of spirit into physical form, like you're saying, you said before, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Can you see your spirit? As it says in Hebrews, faith is evidence of things unseen. Well, it seems like it doesn't exist, except it does. So it's another form of the same thing. It's really equals MC squared, okay? Multiple ways to spin your head around it, but just notice it's found in other teachings too. Deep in silence you must linger until you are freed from desire. Conquer by silence the bondage of words. See, we get lost in words. Course in Miracles calls words double illusions, okay? They're lies twice, because first of all, it's just somebody made up the word table. It could have been called floor. All right, if somebody called that a floor a long time ago, you'd be calling it a floor. It's the floor is resting on the table. What? Okay. But we just go with it. All right? Those things they're not actually true. They're small t truths. They're a little bit true, but they're not like universally true, like they're not in the 7 Hermetic principles. But then beyond that, words themselves are describing things that are illusions too. That table doesn't even really exist, not in the way that we think. So we're using sort of a made-up thing to describe a made-up thing. Double illusion, right? There's another level, and words mean different things to different people. I mean, if that table fell on you and broke your foot, you'd have a different opinion of that table. And one of my favorite things to say, here's 2 words for you, Jesus Christ. And if I said that, that means a lot of different things to people throughout the world. So the words Jesus Christ themselves, what do they really mean? Not much. The spirit within is what means everything, right? And that's the truth. And so we have to free ourselves from the bondage of words. It's deep in silence we must linger. So here we go, the benefit of what meditation is, right? And learning how to calm the mind. When we have anxiety, we know what that's like. Blah, 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 blah. All these thoughts, all these ideas, all these obsessions, and all this clinging, racing through our mind, and we can't control any of it. Well, guess what happens when we calm all of that? Deep in silence, what happens, in the Hindu philosophy, they call it siddhi, S-I-D-D-H-I. We were all born with the perfect spirit inside of us. You don't have to do anything to get it. You just have to quiet everything else. The perfection is then revealed. You know, your true self shows up when you shut up the ego self or the temporary self. And that's silence. I think it says, is it coming up here? Yes. In the silence of material senses lies the key to the unveiling of wisdom. The silence of the material senses. You ever thought about making your nose go silent or your eyes go silent? No, of course not. It's just it's poetry, right? What is the silence of your material senses? Quiet them all. Now you have 5 basic senses which your ego uses. Your body uses it to do what? To experience the physical world, which is you're going to see at the end. It's ultimately just a gift. I mean, we're here for a certain period of time to experience this place, to develop some spiritual muscle, and you need your 5 senses for that. Well, what sense to use for your spiritual awakening? Well, they call it the 6th sense. And if you could shut up those 5 senses, Krishna says that in the Gita, when your senses are controlled, okay, but you keep recalling sense objects with your mind, you're a self-deluded hypocrite. So if you've got control of those 5 senses, but you keep falling for it again, right? You keep thinking the physical world is primary, you're a self-deluded hypocrite. Some harsh language, but it's true. So we're supposed to learn how to control those senses, silence them, if you will, and that unveils wisdom. Look how it happens naturally. You don't have to do anything. The more you quiet the mind, boom, it comes to you. It's exactly what Muhammad did through his 10 years of meditation and just calming and focusing, and then all of a sudden, boom, it came to him. The Buddha, the same thing. He was very frustrated with the fact that he was not quite to the truth that he wanted to get to. So he got really focused, quieted his mind, sat under the Bodhi tree, boom, enlightenment came to him. That's all we have to do, except what we tend to do is go, what do all these things have to do with my life? What's expected of me? What are these jobs that other human beings or expectations have placed on me that I have to go do in order to be a good human being? Well, the answer is none of them. In a minute, we'll talk about Rumi's comment on that. Abstain from eating until you have conquered the desire for food. That is the bondage of the soul. Now, gets a little deep here. Of course, there's some truth when it comes to gluttony, okay? When we eat 10 donuts, okay, every day for a year, okay? Obviously, we need to work on that a little bit. You're feeding the body, not with good stuff, okay? But is this saying you should starve yourself? There's a lot of teachings of Jesus, too, talking about what fasting is, okay? And fasting, he even said it, Gospel of Thomas, you know, we're supposed to fast from the world, but does it mean we're supposed to just never eat? You're supposed to starve yourself? No, that doesn't make sense. It's ego fasting. This type of food is the kind of food that satisfies your ego. And the goal is to learn how to fast from the ego. It's also what the Sabbath means, to take a break from the ego. It doesn't mean you don't have to work on Sundays. Don't ministers and pastors work on Sundays? I mean, they're, of all people, shouldn't be holding church on Sunday. That's work for them, right? And what does Jesus say about donkeys falling into a well? I mean, obviously, you need to work on a Sunday if your donkey falls into a well, right? So we're also not literally talking about food here, but we are talking, it can be about food, but we are talking about learning how to starve yourself of the ego desire. Now, there's that kind of food, but then there's food for the soul. When you starve yourself of the physical desire, and that's when I work with so much addiction, whether it's a drug or alcohol or a cigarette or whatever it is you choose to work on, fasting from, could be chocolate during Lent, whatever. In the process of trying, it's not like God is mad at you because you're eating chocolate or smoking, okay? God's like the sun, it's just constantly shining. It's no judgment whatsoever. But can you learn how to get to the type of wisdom we're talking about by practicing discipline? Sure, you can do that in so many different ways. Not a single one of them is a requirement. We just did that with the Eightfold Path. No commandments, just precepts, says the Buddha. Just suggestions. Try this, try that. Try not to step on an ant. That's useful. Try not to eat meat. Okay? Try not to smoke that cigarette. Whatever. But you're not bad if you do. But if you practice it, what you're doing is you're trying to free yourself from the bondage of those senses. In all space, there is only one wisdom. It is one in the one. See, that's the perennial philosophy. And once you understand what the one wisdom is, these 7 Hermetic principles are going to help a lot. That one wisdom is like gravity. It just applies all the time. I'm not going to let go of these. Yeah, I will. Okay. So I knew that was going to fall because I understand gravity. Does that surprise any of you? You know how many forces are acting upon you like that are truth, that works on everybody? So many forces. There's even more than 7, but those are the very specific forces. But I like to say certain laws, like forgiveness always feels better than resentment. Do I need to be in a religion to be able to say that? Isn't it just true? Just fact. Then you have some amazing teachers like Jesus Christ coming along who fully brought the Spirit fully into himself. And then he administered it and delivered it to others. And if we just understand what he did, we can become Christ-like too. That's Christianity. There's no problem with following that. In fact, it's a great strategy. I would suggest it. But don't exclude others because you choose his path. That's what the Buddha said. There's an infinite number of pathways to get there. And I love the Christian path when it's done correctly, done like Jesus, not like a lot of the interpreters. You do it the right way, it's all one. Didn't Jesus, when he was asked the most important commandment, I think this is in Luke, then he says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one." And he gets to it. You know what Tawhid in Islam is? It's God is one. It's all one. Entanglement, the science, we're all interconnected. It's all one. So here we have Hermes again, a couple thousand years ago, saying, guess what? It's all one. All philosophies are one. You just have to dig a little deep to see the connections. All that exists comes forth from the light, and the light comes forth from all. I mentioned Rumi earlier, and he said that we are not drops in the ocean. We are oceans in a drop. Each of us individually have all the spirit, all the wisdom of Hermes and Jesus and Muhammad, and all those teachings, and all the ability to express those teachings through us. All of us have it. Because we all come from that source. In fact, some of that source was placed inside of us. And so that whole Rumi drop in the ocean thing is perfect. You're way bigger than you think. You're also way smaller than you think, if you're ego-laden. But it's a very fine balance. It was the philosopher that said, my head thinks I'm everything, my heart thinks I'm nothing, in between the two my life flows. Or maybe it's the opposite. But the point is, we all have this experience of, wait, I'm a teeny tiny little being, but you're as great as the universe. Balancing those two things is what this verse is saying here. And it's your ability. All that exists comes forth from the light. We all come from the same source. Everything does. That's the first verse of the Tao, or early on in the Tao, that the Tao gives birth to 10,000 things. And the light comes forth from all, which means each being, everyone has it. And this does not exclude anyone. As Krishna also says, if you could perceive the unity in every other being, you will attain the infinite light. But that means I have to see the light in each of you. And I also have to see the light in circumstances. I have to see the light in tragedies and crucifixions, right? Doesn't mean I have to like them, but I do have to see the love in them. That's how you attain the infinite light. It also kills the ego in the process quite nicely, because the ego doesn't want to forgive, right? The ego wants to fear. It wants to hold on to judgment, right? It thinks things are better or worse than. That's what the ego does. The ego thinks, I chose the right prophet, so therefore you're going to hell. Ha ha, right? It's clearly the ego at work. Whereas spirit says, we're all brothers and sisters in spirit, and we're all equal, and we're all one. And that's great mental health, drops judgment, lets you move past shame and guilt, stuff like that. And so that's why I like to work on it. And you're going to find that again in these principles moving forward. So where are we? Oh, he who knows the fire that is within himself shall ascend into the eternal fire and dwell in it eternally. Okay? Once you recognize the fire of conscious spirit, okay? The fire, metaphor, not literal fire. The fire within is that we can burn with that passion to find truth and understand truth. Once you recognize that and you go, oh, that is me. That's why I'm leaving that up there. That's the exact same concept of samadhi. Once you go, oh, I get it. I am you, you are me. I am, right? The fact is we're all together in oneness. Once you get that, you've just won the game. It also helps other people win the game. It's back to Leela, the game that we're playing in Hinduism. We're divine creatures playing a game. What's the name of the game? Put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We shattered into all these pieces, but my job, disconnected as I felt for some time, is to learn how to come back into, put myself in the right place in the puzzle and then facilitate. Love another as oneself, right? All of us are playing this game whether we know it or not. And so find that fire within, now you find yourself in that lake. And you get to live in that eternally. That's no big deal. You could always die and come back. Jesus did that. Buddha says he had 24 lives. I believe that's what I read. 24 lives. There's a Buddhist teacher in Australia that said if you don't believe in reincarnation in this lifetime, next lifetime you will. So whatever. You could always stay in that lake and swing by. Krishna said, I appear again in age after age. There are those who think Hermes went from being to being, some of these ones that I mentioned. And all of us have access to these greater truths right now. And if you channel it, guess what? You're a prophet. Channeling it just means understanding it and then talking about it. And then guess what? We're all prophets. I looked this up a while ago. It just means a teacher of God. Honestly, the bar for a prophet is pretty low if you're a teacher of God. Now, to teach God correctly is much higher, of course. But all of us have that potential. It's in all these teachings. Fire, the inner fire, is the most potent of all forces. It overcomes all things and it penetrates to all things of the earth. Now, this will matter a great deal as we get into alchemy, okay? It's the most powerful force. It will defeat everything. Doesn't light always make darkness go away? I know there are people who've written about this, but one day I'd like to do this more. But this is Star Wars stuff and the lightsaber, right? If you have a Star Wars lightsaber, you know what I'm talking about there? Boy, how powerful is that thing? You do have it. It's called your heart, or the Philosopher's Stone. We'll be getting into that. You do have the ability to defeat all things. Once you have the lightsaber in your hands, okay? That ability is given onto each of us. You just have to choose it. Remember, an Israelite is a person who is struggling with God, and to be a chosen one, you just have to raise your hand. You know, if you're in class, I need a volunteer. I'll do it. You're chosen. All you have to do is want this. Knock, and the door will be open. Seek, and you shall find. Right? It's available to everybody. The flesh is fleeting. The things men count great are nothing to us. The things we seek are not of the body, but are only the perfected state of the soul. Like Jesus didn't say exactly that. What did he say? What good is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul? He also said, John 6:63, the flesh counts for nothing, the spirit gives life. Hermes said it 200 years before him, or whatever, some dude did. Maybe my neighbor's 5-year-old kid did. Does it matter? It's true, okay? The ego obsesses about physical things, but it's fleeting. I remember in the Buddhist teaching, the deeper you get, he called them flickering lights, because you get it a little bit, but then you go back to the flesh again. Well, the flesh is really what's fleeting. What's constant is the light. Man, maybe Einstein said something about that. He did in relativity. He said the light is constant. It's the physical world, space and time that change. Light is constant, though. It doesn't flicker. And so the spirit in you's never flickered. It's really the ego that does the flickering all the time, right? And it's the moon, the waxing and waning of the moon. The sun is consistent. We flicker with the ego. And so, yeah, of course the flesh is fleeting. What we're supposed to do is work on the perfected state of the soul. When you learn that nothing but progress of the soul can count in the end, then truly you are free from bondage and free to work in harmony with the law. So again, what's your priority? Once you figure out that nothing but the progress of the soul matters. It's logical, right? I mean, come on, what do you get to take with you upon death? You know, your favorite blankie? If Kristen were here, I'd mention I still sleep with my pillow that I had when I was a baby, okay? She calls it my whoopee. But she teases me, why are you still sleeping with that? Because it's comfortable, shut up. Anyhow, I don't get to take that with me. Now she's gonna laugh that I did that on video. But the fact is, you don't get to take nothing with you. You don't get to take family with you, right? Loved ones, good luck doing that. Now, maybe You're going to see them on the other side because, you worked on all this. That'll happen, but it'll be in spirit form. Right? The truth is we get to take nothing with us, so we know this is true. So what are we doing while we're here? Working on physical gain or spiritual gain? Can you work on both at the same time? Of course you can. That's called integration. Or Jesus, give to Caesar that which is Caesar's, give to God that which is God's. We can play both games if you want, just don't neglect the spiritual one. That's the only one that's going to work in the end, right? Rumi, of course, said, one of my favorite all-time teachings of Rumi's, we're only here to do one thing. If a king sends you into a country to do one thing, but you come back and you did 100 other things, the king's going to say, off with his head, okay? But if you do the one thing the king asks you to do, and you give it to the king, he'll say, good job, servant. You did the one thing I asked you to do. Now I'm going to ask you to do something tomorrow. We were all sent here to do one thing. It's to find a connection to our divine true nature. That's the one thing we're supposed to be doing. And Rumi says, you could do a great many other things, but if you don't do that one thing, you will have done nothing at all. We're all here. The word religion means reconnect. Reconnect. Think that one through. It doesn't mean connect for the first time. It's to go back to remember your divinity. You came here from another source, born into this world to have an experience. Now you have to reconnect to that. Remember that which you already knew. This one's a little fun. The Big Bang. People wonder what happened before the Big Bang. Well, Hermes answers it. Well, there was no matter, he says. There existed no matter, only force. Can you guys see force? Again, gravity. Can you see the force? You can only see its effect. I can't see forces. Maybe certain scientists with certain equipment can see forces, but I'm not even sure. Forces existed before the Earth and before the universe. Okay? That existed. People are always trying to figure out, how did something come from nothing? It didn't come from nothing. It came from forces. Okay? And then it says this. That force was a vibration of purposeful thoughts which filled the void. Purposeful thoughts which filled the void. And here we are. That's us when we get into these teachings here too. We have to just resonate with those purposeful thoughts. And if our thoughts aren't purposeful, resonating with that, we end up with mental health issues. And then stuff like war, right? And all the human suffering. But when we resonate with that, we're like joining with the Creator's mind. I looked into the hearts of men, and there I found greater mysteries. But only in the search for truth could my soul be stilled, and the flame within be quenched. I've drawn this many times over the years. The Kabbalah heart with all the various desires inside and little dots, and they're competing. They're called nations competing. But there's one desire called the point in the heart that will satisfy you. This says quenched, okay? The desire for spiritual development is the final stage in Kabbalah, and that will satisfy you. Your awakening will satisfy you. What's not to like about joy all the time? You could be at peace if other people beat your team in the Super Bowl. I struggled with that for a long time, still a little bit. But you can also be at peace if someone nails you to a cross. Because this is stuff Jesus did. It's precisely what he did, and he showed us better than anyone else ever, I believe, because he showed us in the flesh exactly how far this could go. He took this type of teaching and he totally nailed it. The only thing that quenched his soul was him finding God. And it reminded me, or realizing he was God. I'll let you figure that one out, right? The fact is, it reminds me of something Carl Jung said. Carl Jung said, at root of all addiction is an intense craving for God. And I've worked with it for over 20 years now, and it's totally true. People who find God, they don't really feel like using it anymore. They have to find the right God, not the judgmental God, not the God that might send them to hell if they keep using drugs or something like that. Not that God, that doesn't exist. But the graceful God, the God of no judgment, the God of fearlessness, right? The God of love of everything, that kind of God, that heals everything. So, wrapping it up, we're going to pull these three together. There's three more, and it ends what I like to call, it's the meaning of life section here. These three verses come together beautifully. Though hidden in darkness, your soul is a spark of the true flame, and it exists. It's hidden in darkness. It's there, but light in a darkness will always be exposed. If you look in the right spot, you'll be able to see the light. But light is hidden in the darkness. It's a spark of the true flame. Be one with the greatest of lights and find at the source the end of your goal. We're here with one mission, like Rumi said. We are here to find our source. Jesus says we should dissolve into our own root. Well, what's our origin? It's not when mommy and daddy got together and produced our bodies, okay? That's more physical stuff. Your origin is what's the origin of your consciousness? What's the origin of your spirit? Did that involve mom and dad? I got plenty of teachings on Christmas on this channel as well. And no, to look at it physically is to lose the story. The fact is, it's a non-physical experience of God, okay? It doesn't have to happen in the flesh. We're all virginal that way. We're all born that way by realizing, nothing to do with sex. It's not about intercourse. It's about actually recognizing that I'm a spiritual being, independent of all this physical stuff. That's to really know who you are. And now you have found your source, which he says is the end of your goal. It's the Alpha and the Omega, right? Once you realize, as I put in the beginning in New Eyes, the end is where the beginning is. Then you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I get it. See, I started out as a spirit. I ended up as a spirit. Apostle Paul says, foolish Galatians, what makes you think you're going to start as a spirit and be perfected by the flesh? Again, these teachings are there. Who's going to please God with behaviors? It doesn't make any sense. You don't need to please God at all. You just have to realize you are a piece of God. That's it. It's all these teachings coming together. When you have gained the light of wisdom, free you shall be to shine in the ether. Now I've drawn this here, okay? I've drawn this a few times before, but here I have the way most of us, no, actually all of us live our lives for a while. First, physically, spirit secondarily. Some people don't even do that, okay? But all of us live physically because, it's what's in front of our faces. So we live physically, and we occasionally get around to spirituality. This whole journey of all this spiritual stuff and what I like to do in therapy, what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks as well, is really nail down this idea that's the exact opposite, and yet very close. All we have to do is realize that the eternal self is primary, and the temporary self is secondary. You don't give this up. There's no ego death, like my favorite scene in Revolver when the ego shoots itself. Seconds later, it comes back laughing at you. You can't kill the ego. Can you tame it? Yeah. Can you put it in its place? Yeah. Or like in Revolver, when Jake says, you don't control me, I control you. Hello, that's the whole thing. You want the ego to run your life? That's what we do for the longest time. It's why the world is in such disarray. It's why we all go through so many problems. The ego and the shame and the guilt and the fear and the judgment and all that stuff. Ego, spirit does nothing. Nothing like that. But when we reverse it, now we've got the all-encompassing, all-embracing, unifying love. It's agape. If we put that first, then we realize that we're all little, that's an ocean inside a drop. And yet we're little drops in the ocean. That's true. We're all different, but we're the same in our differences. Here we are, all of us coming from this source. And so we have, when you gain the light of wisdom, you shall be free to shine in the ether. Now you bring the spirit into flesh. Gee, I wonder if Jesus had a prayer about that. Yeah, he did, on earth as it is in heaven, okay? You're supposed to bring the spirit into earth and have it in your body. That's what Jesus did. And that's the whole point of his story. He brought the earth, or the heaven down to earth. Did I say it the right way? Heaven to earth. That's the Lord's Prayer. And so he brought heaven to earth. He came down here to show us the way to do it. Becomes a fabulous role model for it. And if you believe in him, sure enough, you're going to get it too. But it doesn't mean to the exclusion of all the rest of this. I mean, I'm showing you right where Hermes said the same stuff, and he was before Jesus. How would he know what Jesus said? But he also came to this awareness. All of us have that ability. That's what Jesus pointed out to us. You can come to this awareness too. You're the light too. Hey, Hermes said it. You're also the light. And now you can shine in the ether. I like to say this. Our first destiny, I've got 2 videos on our channel about this. Our first destiny is the same. All of us are supposed to find our spirit within. It's already there. You don't have to go very far for it. You have to reveal it. It's just through awareness. We all share that destiny. Completely fair. After that, step 2, that's unity, by the way, what I just said. After that is diversity. And you're going to do it your way, and you're going to do it your way, and you your way, and thank goodness y'all don't look like me. This is my only talent. I can't do anything else. You don't want me cooking for you. You don't want me singing for you or dancing for you. I don't have any fashion sense. Okay? All of that is, I'm glad you guys do that stuff. Life would be boring if you're all like me. But first unity, then diversity. First unity, then diversity. And now we can have a world where we're living spiritually together. And we won't have any judgment. Then it'd just be celebrating our differences. That's what it should be. Because we're all little pieces of God, right? And I call that the gift. So the first thing, and I will say that the Bible just isn't funny enough. I wish they had a little bit more humor in there. But I'd like to see this point made a little stronger. It's a lot of work to get to your spirit. That's true. But from then on, just play, man. That's it. It's a playground. Create. We're down here to be creators together. Have fun, explore stuff. And when we're over, we're just going to go back to home. Whatever that dimensional state is, fifth dimension. So there's the journey, and we wrap up with this. Darkness transmuted is light of the light. Darkness transmuted is light of the light. This, my children, is your purpose in being. Transmutation of darkness to light. That's taking the lower vibrational ego state into the higher vibrational spiritual state. And it's ultimately exactly what alchemy is all about. To take vibrational states, if you will, frequencies that are low, which is a lot of what mental health and behavioral health is all about, that we don't like, and bring it to a higher vibrational state. You could call that bad and good. I mean, it's not the best way to describe it, but it's the way we experience it. Moving out of what we would call bad emotional feelings into good emotional feelings. But that's called transmutation. And he says that's your purpose in being. We come here, get lost, lower vibrational state, get found, higher vibrational state. And that's precisely what these next 2 weeks are going to be. Learning about the 7 Hermetic principles that we can all use to be aware of, like gravity, that they're always at work. And then we end in alchemy, which is one of the most profound set of spiritual laws that I've ever encountered, and we're going to use it therapeutically.